Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan says the energy sector contributes over 40% to South Africa's carbon emissions. He was speaking yesterday during a panel discussion at the Presidential Climate Commission, where he's also slammed other countries for attempting to dictate what's best for South Africa on the just energy transition. For more on this topic, we're joined now by energy expert Chris Yelland. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. We know that the Public Enterprises Minister says the electricity sector in South Africa is perhaps the biggest contributor to carbon emissions with over 40%, and that's why perhaps the focus on the sector is to the extent that it's in. When it comes to South Africa's economic reality, what adjustments do you think are needed on the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan?
Yeah, so we have to look at the lowest hanging fruit first, and that is clearly the power sector. And there's a lot of good reasons why we should focus on this, including the fact that the coal-fired power stations many of them are reaching the end of their life, and many of them are performing very, very poorly indeed and need to be replaced in any case. So the question now is, what shall we replace them with? And the answer is absolutely clear. If you want to reduce carbon emissions, you need to replace them with projects and plants that can be delivered quickly and that have zero emissions. And the best options for this are wind and solar PV and battery storage and pump storage and gas to power. Gas to power running at low load factor as peaking plant and as balancing plant. Those are solutions that can be delivered quickly and that will ensure low carbon emissions. Now, as I say, we have to replace many of these old coal-fired power stations in any case. So it makes absolute good sense to replace them now as soon as possible with low carbon emitting, low water use technologies.
So with climate change being a massive danger to humanity and a much needed action that's to protect South Africa and the continent, what pace does this now need to happen at to address the country's energy problems?
Yeah, it needs to happen smartly, shall we say. We are already behind the curve. And the world is facing a very significant threat from climate change, and we in South Africa are particularly vulnerable. We have to play our part, and if we don't, we are going to be punished. Punished through what is known as cross-border carbon adjustment tariffs on products from South Africa that are generated or produced, manufactured using high-carbon electricity and high-carbon processes. So if we want to continue exporting our products, we need to start addressing the carbon footprint of our products, and one of the ways of doing this is through reducing the carbon content of electricity. About 80% of the electricity produced in South Africa comes from coal, and going forward, this presents major risks to South Africa's economy.
So what about what we've heard from Minister Pravin Gordhan, the hypocrisy by European nations who are using coal and other fossil fuels to stabilize their energy grids, yet, on the other end, they're expecting developing countries to let go of fossil fuels. Where and what are the big loopholes there?
Look, the thought that the European Union is increasing its carbon footprint through coal-fired power stations is actually wrong. They have a clear, program of actually reducing their carbon emissions to reach net carbon zero by 2050. And there has been absolutely no change in this approach. There are indeed short-term challenges with the replacement of coal that they previously got from Russia with coal from other sources. That does not mean that they are increasing their carbon footprint. They are simply replacing what they used to get from Russia from other sources. But their overall plan remains unchanged, and that is to reduce coal-fired generation and to reach net carbon zero by 2050 and major reductions by 2030. So we must not think and fall for the propaganda that is being put out that they are in fact increasing their carbon footprint whilst trying to force South Africa to reduce its carbon footprint. That is simply not true.
So there's a report that's asked some really important questions around the huge potential of decarbonizing the electricity sector, asking whether perhaps 2023, could it be the year that renewable power generations reach the tipping point where power generation's emissions begin to fall? What are your views around that sort of conversation?
Well, there's no doubt that, we have some targets for 2030 and we have some targets for 2050. And there is no doubt that we're going to have to, make significant reductions by 2030. And I have no doubt that we will do just that because a number of our coal-fired power stations simply have to be decommissioned. There's talk of extending the life of coal-fired power stations. To be honest, this is really not possible in the South African environment for a number of reasons, least of all the cost. And the Minister of Finance has come out, recently, and it's reported in the media today, that there will be no more money for the suggested plan by the Electricity Minister to extend the life of the coal-fired power stations and get additional money from the Treasury for this purpose. That has been refuted by the Minister of Finance. There will be no more new money to extend the life of these coal-fired power stations. And I think we have to realize the hard reality is that we not only do we need to, but it will be the least cost option going forward to convert these old, very poorly performing power plants, very, very poorly, to newer, modern technology that is clean, that is reliable, and in combination with flexible generation such as battery storage, such as pump storage, such as hydropower and gas to power, this can deliver the least cost electricity with the least carbon emissions, with the least water usage, and with the most job creation. It makes absolute economic sense to actually decommission these poorly performing plants and not to throw good money after bad.
Yeah. While all the planning and the solutions are being put in place, what we do know, as you and I speak, Koeberg Unit 2 tripped this morning, which means that Stage 6 load shedding will be continuing with a couple of breaks during the day. But with that reality in mind, what should we now expect as we move into the colder winter months?
Yeah, so Unit 1 at Koeberg has been off for some months now. It was planned to come back on in June, but the plan is going awry. So the plan is now to add an extra 3 months of downtime to Unit 1, which will mean Unit 1 will not be available throughout the 3 winter months, June, July, August. And at the same time, last night, Unit number 2 also tripped out. So as we speak at this moment, no power, zero, is coming from Koeberg Power Station. And we don't know because Eskom have not told us. 16 hours after the trip out of Unit number 2, Eskom has still not told us what is the reason for the trip out and when it is going to come back on stream. And for me, that is rather ominous, because if it was a minor trip out for some process reason and was likely to be up within a few hours or a day or so, I'm sure we would have been told by now. But the fact that Eskom remains silent, and I've been pushing Eskom today on this point, and they cannot and will not give an answer yet, and probably that means that things are a little bit more complicated than a normal process trip out. And, well, I don't want to speculate too much, But the mere fact that they are not communicating the reason and when it will come up leads me to have some additional concern.
With those additional concerns, what does it mean as we get into the colder months? I mean, that surely doesn't sound promising at all. It sounds like it could get worse.
Well, right now, we are minus 1,800 megawatts from Koeberg alone. We're minus 3,200 megawatts from Kusile Power Station, and we're minus 800 megawatts from Medupi Power Station. And if you add that up, it comes to five stages of load shedding, are a direct result of these major problems. So, well, let's hope that the trip of unit number 2 at Koeberg is not a major problem. We still don't know the reasons, and hopefully, if we are, if things go well, maybe it'll be up relatively shortly, but we just don't know at the moment because Eskom is not communicating.
Yeah, and that's a problem. Thank you so much for your time. Let's perhaps leave it there for now. Energy expert Chris Yelland speaking to some of the power utility Eskom issues, as well as what Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan had to say